Hello, I'm Scotty, and welcome to Scotty's Toy Box. I haven't made a video in a long time, but today is a special day, and I want to share some information with everyone. See, Ron and I have been together since 1990. That's a long time. I bet a lot of you weren't born back then. But here's the thing. In October of 1990, we made a commitment to each other to spend the rest of our lives together. And it's worked out pretty good. So this makes our 30th year together. Isn't that special? A lot of couples can't say that. But it was only in this day, in 5 years ago, the 12th of January 2015, that Ron and I were able to legally commit our marriage and get the benefits of being a couple that are offered to opposite sex couples in this country with no second thoughts. There are celebrities that get married and divorced in the matter of hours, and nobody cares. They don't claim it's a travesty or ruins the sanctity of the commitment. I could go into a long list of that, but that's not what this is about. So, we've been together, this is our 30th year, but legally we had no protections. We had to have powers of attorney. We had to have medical papers because, see, neither of us could legally speak for the other without all these papers and designs and things. I've known people who, before marriage was legal, who had a spouse go into the hospital, a same-sex partner go into the hospital, and they could not speak for them. Doctors like the one I worked with in the ICU, who was so great a Christian, went to the Vatican twice a year, met with the high-ups, hoo-hoo, but wouldn't allow committed gay couples to speak for each other. That's bigotry. That's that's discrimination for religious reasons, and it's unacceptable. So, anyway, in 2014, let me backtrack for those who don't know. I have a bone and muscle condition. My bones are genetically dying, changing. Sometimes, like around a joint, they might close off a blood vessel. But on the other hand, normally throughout my body, my bones are very weak, very thin. My body doesn't use the calcium that it has to make up the bones, and that can make me very anemic because my marrow is not producing the right amount of red blood cells. But basically what happens is my bones just disintegrate, change. They can grow lesions, they can grow spiky parts that catch, like in my spine. Oh, it's horrible. The nerves in my spine are like being shredded by it. And surgery won't help. Okay, so that's my medical condition, parts of it. In 2014, I had lost my entire left hip, and I couldn't work. Now, I'd already had the right one replaced in 1997. They replaced my, after a couple of surgeries to try to save it, they replaced my right hip. So that's 24 24 years old, 20 something years old, 23 years old. Now, so you go to 2014, I lose my job. I have no insurance under my own name, and I cannot go on Ron's insurance, who I'd been with for 20 some years, because it was not legally required. We couldn't get married. Now, people ask, why is same-sex marriage so important? Why is it that you have to have that designation? And I'll explain it to you. There is over 1,100 rights and benefits given to married people that are not given to just couples, to people that live together, cohabitate. Over 1,100 benefits. So, what was we to do? We didn't have a lot of money. We just lost my income, and I desperately needed medical care. Pain relief especially. But I had other issues. So, luckily for me, they had passed the ACA, known as Obamacare. And I had worked just enough to get in and at a good rate. As I couldn't marry Ron, they couldn't take his income. They had to look at me, and I was poverty level indigent. I was fricked. So I was able to sign up for it, got Obamacare, and it paid for the medical treatments that I desperately needed. Now, the next year, that was 2014, the very next year, in January, they legalized, Florida finally dropped the fight. They legalized same-sex marriage. Thank goodness, it got really, really sickening hearing all these arguments about why I wasn't worthy, Ron wasn't worthy for us to be together. From people that had had 3 or 4 marriages. Who's counting? So, we got married. I went on his insurance. Things started looking great. I thought, I'll get some relief. I'll get a new hip. Wasn't to be. Wasn't to be because I couldn't afford the copays. And we still were without a second income. Ron is a trained professional with 28 years or more in this job, this kind of job he has. He works for an ICU, and he doesn't make enough money to really, and he makes the maximum amount, but he can't really he can't really afford to live and live alone on just his salary. He's not a nurse, he's a CNA advanced. Now nurses complain, they make anywhere from $100,000 to, they make $26 an hour up to, I knew one nurse that was making $150,000. Him and his wife were making each $150,000 and complaining about how hard it was. So anyway, I filed for disability. I had been on disability for this problem before. And I went off disability stupidly, foolishly, thinking that I was much, much better and I wanted to go to work. I wanted to be out there in the public. I wanted to earn an income. And in 4 years, my body was so destroyed that I ended up hospitalized. I cannot work, period. But when I went to file for disability, for some reason this time it was kicked back. Last time it went through within a period of months. This time it was kicked back, and we didn't know why. So we kept filling out the forms, doing the appeals, and finally we went and hired a lawyer, and now we're going on 3 years. I'm now in a wheelchair because of the problem I'm having. I can't go out anywhere. If I go out, I have to go in a wheelchair because simply I can't walk and that. So we have the hearing, and then they finally told me what the problem was, why they kept kicking it back. Well, now they don't have that. They have to tell you right up front where the problem is. Back then they didn't. So, turned out that in these stack of forms you have to fill out each time, they ask you the same question 6, 7, 8 times to see if you change any little part of it. And I had answered the question, how is your job? Or why can't you perform your job? 2 different ways. Because over the period of the 4 years, my job changed. Not how I could perform it, but the job itself changed. When I first started, I was more of a receptionist. I handled the computers. The doctors wrote their orders in handwriting, and I put them in the computers and ordered the tests. I kept the books. I answered the phones. That was my job. But when the system changed and the doctors were required to put their own orders in, I had nothing to do at that point, so I switched to patient care. Much harder, much more demanding. And I worked with the nurses to assist them. That was my job, assisting the nurses, taking out the trash, picking stuff up. Basically, less administrative than I was, and more on hands, which is totally a lot harder. But because the job changed and because I answered the questions honestly, they held it up for 3 years. We went before a judge. The judge ruled, they had a guy there who is your opponent. He's the guy who's supposed to say, no, you can't work because you can do this. And if you can sit for 20 hours a week, they consider you not disabled. I know, it's stupid. So, the judge says to this guy, so, can Mr. Miller be employed under these conditions? And the guy said, no. The judge went, oh, okay. And I was approved. 3 years later, in all that agony. So in 2017, I got my hip surgery. I got better. And for the first year, it was great. And that is why I'm making this video. We need Medicare for All. Ron cannot retire despite his health problems because we need his work insurance. He can't change jobs to an easier one that wouldn't hurt him so badly because we need that insurance. They're destroying the ACA, which a lot of people require, which has things like no prior conditions. If it wasn't for that, even if he could change and get insurance, it wouldn't cover us because of our prior conditions. We're in our later years. We have diabetes, we have high blood pressure, we have, he has a whole list of prior conditions. He's had a heart attack, he's had a stroke, he's got Sjogren's disease, he's got MS. But he has to keep doing this incredibly hard job just for the medical coverage. This is what's wrong with our medical system today. Medicare, medications, health coverage is a right. It's a human right. It is a crime against humanity to make people suffer. Now, we can do it. It is possible 34 or 33 countries do it. Out of the 34 industrial developed nations, only one says they can't. And that's the richest country on the earth. Does that make sense? All these other countries can do it, but we can't. Why? Because profit and greed and bribes to our Congress. That's all it is. Profit, greed, and bribes. Unrestrained capitalism. They don't care. You are not a person to the healthcare system. And it's deadly and it's dangerous. So I suffered all those years. Ron's suffering now at a job he can hardly do, that he comes home and he can't walk. I have to go out and bring his lunch bag and his backpack in. I mean, he could do it, but it hurts him so badly. You know, by the time he gets home, he's shuffling to walk. Can't quit the job, can't change, because we need his work insurance. That's my point. That's the point of this video. The healthcare system in this country is unsustainable and broken. We pay so much more than the rest of the world. We get so much less. We don't have to do this. There is a way. Both Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, have plans. I like Warren's better. Elizabeth Warren has laid out exactly how to pay for it, and every cent is paid for. Speaking of costs, there are different numbers, but the Koch brothers, the Heritage Foundation that they support, did a cost breakdown. And they found out, according to their numbers, Medicare for All was going to cost about $32 trillion over 10 years. $32 trillion! That's incredible. That's expensive. But what no news agency wants to report is that very same study said that it was going to cost 34 to 36 trillion at the current system we have. Think about that. Medicare for All saves the country and the people money. Straight up, no questions asked, it saves money. It's cheaper. So when they ask, how are we going to afford it? We can afford it because we're already paying more. Plus, it really just ticks me off. Nobody says, how are we going to afford the military budget? How are we going to afford a new war? How are we going to afford tax cuts for the wealthy? No, they don't ask that. They just pass it. That's good. Food stamps that cost, a tiny fraction of that? Oh, we got to cut them, man. We got to throw millions of people off. Hungry people, children that need food. So we can't afford it. Sorry. Got to cut Social Security. They are kicking people off Medicaid. Stop and think about it. Medicaid is for the poorest of the poor because we can't afford it. But we can give trillions of dollars in tax cuts and add that to the deficit for wealthy. It doesn't give the rest of the country anything. Nobody got anything out of that. There was no spike in jobs. There was no spike in earning growth. There was no spike in treasury money, income coming into the treasury. None of that happened. In fact, jobs were lost because the companies used that money to buy back their own stock. So again, Medicare for All is necessary. It has to happen. Our medical system as it is dying. It's in its last gasp. Rural hospitals, country hospitals are closing or being bought up by the Catholic Church, which is just as bad, okay? Because they only give care based on their religious beliefs. But all hospitals are struggling and have to charge incredible stupid rates. $35 to hold your baby after you give birth. That's ridiculous. But they have to try to find any way they can to keep giving care. So I'm going to wrap this up. It's over 20 minutes, and I only meant to do a 3-minute video on my marriage. That I've been legally married for 5 years, and the religious bigots in this country want to take that away from me. They've been chipping away at my rights since it happened. Think about it. They want the legal right to say, I don't have to serve you. I don't have to do for you what I do for every other person in the country. If you take gay out of it, or same-sex marriage, and put mixed race marriage, mixed religion marriage, and they say, no, we refuse to bake a wedding cake. That's the standard, I guess. We refuse to bake a wedding cake for a white and black couple because our religion. Would anybody say, well, that's okay? They should have that right. No, they shouldn't. And if you think it stops with just same-sex marriage, you're wrong. I forget which politician it was. Maybe it was Huckabee or whatever. Said not only... No, it wasn't. It was that guy in California, that real whack job. Dana Rothberger or something like that, who said you shouldn't have to rent property or sell property. You shouldn't even sell property, rent or sell, to gay people. Okay. Anyway, we went all through this. We need Medicare for all. I'm just going to start doing videos because apparently I don't know when to shut up. Sorry, this one wasn't a laugh video. Normally my videos are pretty easy going in that. But I can get worked up. And I can't do this typing. The old arthritic fingers and that. Some of them twisted up. Whew, I can't type. And I got a fancy new keyboard. Oh, I love it. Very soft touch and everything. Let's see if I can get it up here. Special keyboard. And expensive, $99. But beautiful. And it controls both computer systems. So anyway, got one thing off my desk. Hey, I'm Scotty. This has been Scotty's Toy Box, and I wish you the best, every one of you, and hugs. There's a button around here somewhere, isn't there? There it is.